Everyone, welcome to our weekly live stream on everything near TypeScript. My name is Adam, and I'm a member of the developer relations team at Neo4j. And so for anybody watching, tuning in for the first time, this is a weekly slot where I usually work through some sort of example project using either TypeScript, Node, JavaScript, something like that. So in some of the previous sessions, I've looked at a fictional client called Neoflix and built some examples around that. So, for example, if you go to this repository, there's a few folders in there that you can take a look at. So in the first couple of weeks, I started to build an API using Nest.js to access data inside of Neo4j database. That project uses a plugin that I subsequently wrote called Nest Neo4j. And that's basically a pre-built module for Nest.js. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to quickly create a Neo4j module, which then gives you a Neo4j service that you can inject into any of your modules or any of your services for easy communication with Neo4j. I've also looked at the real-world example, so realworld.io. I built examples for that using Nest.js, so again using the Nest Neo4j plugin, and also one there for built with Node.js. It's basically a fork of the Express example, which basically uses Neo4j as a backend rather than any other database. And so all these videos are available to watch back. So you can either watch them on the Neo4j YouTube channel, so neo4j.com/YouTube, or they're all on Twitch. And so this week, I'm going to cover a topic that I've not covered for a while, and I've not covered on these streams yet, but this is the concept of graph apps. So if you've not heard of the term graph app before, graph apps are basically single-page applications that are built with HTML, JavaScript, the framework of your choice, and they can be installed into Neo4j Desktop. And when you launch a graph app through Neo4j Desktop, a context API is injected, which provides access to the configuration that you've created inside the desktop. So that's access to projects, and then access to the databases that are inside the project. The graph apps themselves sit in the graph app pane. So it's this 4-square icon here. And it's a list of all of the graph apps I've got installed. And the idea is that they're an extension of Neo4j Desktop. So you can basically interact with Neo4j using Cypher. And an example of this one is this one I built previously. So the Nest Neo-semantics graph app. It's basically an introduction to Neo4j. And to Neo-semantics. Cool. So in terms of information about graph apps, you can go to neo4j.com/developer/graph apps, and I'll give you an overview as to what graph apps are and how to install them. And then it goes into more detail. So there's a guide there for building your own application as well. So it goes into all the details of everything that's available inside the APIs, connecting to a database, creating driver instances, deploying your graph app, and then additional things, for example, like deep links to open your application or to open up Neo4j browser or Neo4j Bloom with a pre-built query. Cool. So for this week, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a graph app using React. So why React? So last week I started working on a library of hooks. called use-neo4j. And so basically just gives you some helpful components and hooks to speed up your React development. So the idea of the library is to take care of all of the boilerplate codes, so you can just concentrate on building your custom components and do the things that are interesting to you. You don't want to write code to connect to Neo4j. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to work through a basic example of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build just a basic admin interface and a graph app for Neoflix, maybe for the Neoflix admin staff, for them to be able to go in and edit the data that's in the database. Cool. So if we jump over to the console now. So basically, I have so inside this this repository. So this is the Twitch project repository, and basically I'm just going to add another folder in there for graph app. So I've added that there. So admin graph app, and I've just created that using the npx create react app commands, and I've used the TypeScript template. Cool. And so yeah, so basically, like I say, everything is going to revolve around this this library called use-neo4j and the hooks that are available on there. So if we take a look at the documentation, so to install it, you can run npm install. So this comes with yarn by default, so I'm going to use yarn instead. So if I yarn add use-neo4j, and that will go away and install the dependencies for me. And as part of this project as well, I'm going to use the React router. So I can add that. And we want the DOM version of that. So yarn add. And also, as well, just to speed things up, I'm going to use the semantic UI. So semantic UI is something that's used by Neo4j Desktop. It's used across Neo4j. Basically, just a quick set of components that I can use to just throw together an API. So I'm just going to go ahead and install that as well. So if we take a look at getting started, so it's semantic UI React and semantic UI CSS. Third time lucky. Cool. So that's up and running. So I should be able to run that now. Cool. So I've got my example project there set up. So if we take a look at the documentation, so we've installed it. So basically, all we need to do to connect to Neo4j is to create an instance of this, or wrap our app in this Neo4j provider. So if I go into app.ts, so there are two ways that you can add the login or add the add use Neo4j to the project. So in both senses, use the Neo4j provider. So I'll just go ahead and I'll import that in. So Neo4j provider from use Neo4j. Actually, if I do this in index.tsx instead, I can add it in here. And so if I do that, then it's going to fall back into the default mode. So basically, I've got the basic login form here. So what I can do is I can add some extra code in there just to get it working. So I just copy and paste that from another repository. So I can import the semantic UI CSS. Where does that sit? So let's have a look at this. So I want to import that one. Cool, so that should change the look of our app a little bit. So yeah, it looks a little bit better. There's some other classes I can add in there. As well, so I'll just take this one I wrote earlier and get rid of those. Cool, so by default there will be a login form supplied to you. And the idea of this is that basically you can just you can connect to Neo4j really quickly and easily. If you don't know the credentials, then up front, then you can just fill them in here. So for example, this should now log in to my Neo4j instance I've got running locally. So on localhost 7687. Cool. So if you know the login details up front, then you can do things a little bit differently. So you can provide a driver as one of the arguments to this Neo4j provider. So you can either create an instance of the Neo4j driver from the Neo4j driver package, or I've added a create driver method here, which could just give you a convenient way of creating the driver. So this will give you some type hinting. So I want to connect through the Neo4j scheme to localhost on port 7687. My username is Neo4j, and then my password is Neo. And again, you can pull this information from an M file if you want to as well. So if I supply that as a prop, then you can see that on the app, everything is logged in for me without me having to do anything. So in theory, that's as little code as you need to do to connect to Neo4j. The next job is then to start to query Neo4j. So in order to do that, we've got some hooks. So if I go into app.tsx, there's a few ways I can get the information. So I can use the context. So if I import the Neo4j context from use-neo4j, I can then pull some information off of that. So I can say, for example, that the context is use context, Neo4j context. And if I just log out that context, and we say I've got an object there. So I've got the driver, which is the driver that I passed through to the Neo4j provider, or I mean, it could be just the one that's created once you log in. I've got the some additional config which isn't currently being used, and I've got the database as well. So if you're in a multi-database setup, then you can specify the database when you log in. So for example, I could take the driver off of that and use destructuring to take that. But instead, what I can do is I can use the use cipher hooks. So for example, I could say use read cipher, and this basically gives me like an interface to pull information from Neo4j. And so it exports some reactive properties that I can then listen for changes on. So there are two hooks that we can use for cipher. So there's use read cipher, and then there's use write cipher. They both return this same interface. So we've got the cipher query as a string, we've got the params, we've got the database it's executed on, and then these reactive properties for handling the query. So we've got whether it's loading or not, whether there's been an error. If there's a result, then it gives us the query result. For the records, we can pull the record off. And then if we just want the first row, then we could just use the first. So what I can do is I can call that hook. So I'm going to do a read cipher. And basically, let's just take some the count of nodes from the database. So I can say match n, return count n as count. And then from that, I can take the loading property. Let's just take the whether there's been an error and then the first item. Cool, so I can change my application now. So if I just remove that for now. So I could say, for example, if the state is loading, then just return a loading message. Actually, I guess what we should be doing instead is saying if there's if loading, then we'll just return so if it's not loading, then we'll get down to this point. So you can say that if there's an error, then we can return a div with the error message in there. If it's not loading anymore and there's no error, then we can say, for example, that the count is the first dot get, and then count. So we're getting the count from here. So this first is it's basically the same as you get inside the use-neo4j driver. It's just the first record. That record has got a get function on there, which allows you to pull something from that individual row. So additionally, what we could be doing is saying, it could be records zeros for the first item, or we can do like a map function on that to get that back. So I could say, there are count nodes in the database. So because this is a use-neo4j integer, so again, like everything else, JavaScript, it's called toNumber on that. And then that'll give us a number. So we take a look at the app. To demonstrate that, if I take off the driver for now. So we get this login form, hit login, and then we've got that the query is being run, and then we've got 149,000 nodes in the database. So it's exactly the same thing for writing data to the database. Basically, we'd swap out read for write. We'd add some parameters in there as well. Cool. So we can also add some parameters in there. So I could say, for example, that the title matrix, like so, get me all of the movies where n.title contains that title parameter, and then return n. So instead of using first this time, I can use records, and I can say that movies equals records.map, and then I'll have a row. We'll assign that, so movie is row.get. So in this case, n, which is that value up there. And I can return a component for that. So the key for that will be movie. So this is like a unique ID. So you can get movie.properties. Say ID. So it's going to be a number again. So we'll convert it to a number. And then movie.properties.title. Cool. Cool. And then if we use that in the component, so we've now got a list of all of the movies with the matrix listed in there. So we've got the matrix series, perhaps we've got return to the source, and then annotated dual matrix. Cool. So that is the basics. Let's now do something a little bit more interesting. So basically, what we want to do is we've got a whole list of movies in the database, and then so say for example we want to build an application for users to go in and edit details. So if we take a look at the code. So the idea behind these hooks is it's a convenient way to get started for building applications that basically that communicate with Neo4j. This isn't something that's intended for production purposes. It's basically something for, you know, if you're sharing a graph app with your friends, with your colleagues, or you just want to prototype something quickly, then you can use Cypher to connect directly to a database or to a cluster of databases or to an OR instance, for example, and then basically run everything through Cypher. If you wanted to use this in a small application, you know, maybe you've got, I don't know, 5-10 users, something using internally inside the company, then this tool is for you. If you're running a social network with millions of users, then this isn't for you really. So the scenario that we've got here is that we've got a whole set of movies in the database, and then basically we just want to provide a way for admin staff to go in and edit some of the details about the movie. So we just build like a simple search functionality and then some forms for editing the information. In Neo4j. Cool. So, and yeah, like no semicolons. I don't like semicolons. You don't need them, so therefore I haven't used them. It gets kind of difficult. I'm switching between JavaScript and in Java or a language that requires them. But for now, I'm not going to do that. You might have to avert your eyes for that. Or I mean, once it's built, you can run it through a linter and you can issue a pull request for me. But yeah, hopefully, Kevin, that's not going to be too bad for you. Cool. Okay, so let's start to build out something a little bit more interesting. So basically, I've got the semantic UI open here. I'll just be jumping back and forwards into that. So basically, there's a few components that I'll be using in there. But in the app itself, so I kind of want it to be sort of stateless. So what I want to do is I want to import some stuff from the React router. Cool. So I want the router. I want the switch, and I want some routes as well. Cool. So I've created an instance of the router there. So anything inside there is going to have the router bound to it, which is kind of what I want. So if I just create like a little menu at the top, so I'll import that from the semantic UI. And I can just, like, for example, have like a menu item in there, and I want that to just go to the home page basically. I want that to be a router link. And I want that to go to the home page. Cool, did I not add that? Let's try that one again. Ah, the old implicit any. Let's run that again. So this is the bit that we chop out of the video that goes up onto YouTube. So I want in there I want like a switch. So that allows me to define the routes. So I want a route, so I want that to be an exact route. The path will be that, and then the component will be home components. If I just create those there for now. One for the movie as well. So I want the browser router, not the router, sorry. Cool, so I've got this now this link, which would always take me back to the home page, and I've got that. So let's brand that, let's call that Neoflix, why not? Cool, so I've got a home page and I've got a movie page. So I can get the match from there. So that should give me params. So I should have an ID there. So if I go to /movies/1, and I have that movie there, so I can pick that up a little bit later on. So I guess what I want to do here is to create some sort of search form, which will allow the user to search. So let's create another folder, views, and then home.tsx. If I swap those around. Default function home. need to import React from React. Let's click use app, I don't want any errors. Cool, wish I'd done that from the start. Cool, so let's take a look at the home page. Okay, so for the home page, there's a couple of things I want to do. So I want to create, I guess the first thing is a search form. So a container will give me a nice wrapper. Get rid of that. Cool. So let's give a segment. I want a form inside there. Form fields. Say search by title. And I want an input there. Type text. Cool, so nice little search box there. So we can hook that up now. So I can use the use state hook to create some state there. So query and set query, use state, and I want that to be a string. So the value of that input box will be query, and then when the input changes, I want to set the query. e.target.value. Perfect, so that's setting that. So basically, I guess what we want to do is we want to create some sort of lists. I think for now what I'll do is I'll just, I won't worry about debouncing or anything like that. I mean, we're going to be hitting an EFJ database, but I'm sure that's fine. But every time something changes and we want to create a list of movies that go below. So for now, I'll just create another component in here. Search results component. So as the props for that, I want to take the query from there, and I want to load some data in there. Cool. So so if I don't know if the query is nothing, then we just want to do nothing basically. But what I can do is I can create some state again. So using that use read cipher hook. So my query, I want it to be match m movie, where m.title contains the query, and then return so first 10. The parameters for that, I want the query, so I'll just pass that straight in. So I want loading, I want, I think we need error, and I'll take the results, the record, sorry, because we're going to have more than one, so we can work with that. So we can say that if loading, and then let's return a div. So by the way, it's still going to be like very basic stuff. It's not going to be, it's not going to look pretty. Let's put it that way. We haven't got enough time to make it look pretty. So dot loading. Otherwise, we can create a list of those movies. So we can say movies is records.map row, and then we want so basically the movie is row.get m. So I'm getting m up there. So this will give me a Neo4j node. I don't know if that's going to. No, it's not. That's fine. So it's going to give me a node. Any information here? No. Okay. So on that that movie, so we're going to have like movie.identity, which is going to be a Neo4j integer, so we can call toNumber on that to get the actual like the internal ID of that movie. So we've got movie.labels, which is string, so we can use that, and then we've got movie.properties, which is an object or like a record, I guess, of string and any, so we can just pull anything that we've got from there. So we've got things that might be interesting. So we've got the title, poster path might be cool. Homepage, vote count, all this stuff might be interesting. So if I take a look at the card, then we can just create like a little card that looks kind of nice in the UI. Cool. So I want to return a card, which I will import from Semantic UI. Cool. So we've not got an image, so we'll skip that bit. But inside the content, so card.content, we've got a header there, so card.header. And I guess what would be interesting in there would be the movie.properties.title. So then we've got the meta that we can add. So we could say, I guess we could do like, that there's a label in there that we can use, which kind of maps quite nicely to what an Neo4j label would look like. So we can do that. So we can say that labels is movie.labels.map row, and then we just want to return a label. Let's call that label. Cool. So we'll stick that in a div. And then what else would be useful? So I guess like could say released in whatever year it's been in. So we can say released in, and then so the release date. So this is an Neo4j date. So it would be movie.properties.release date. So that's going to be a Neo4j date. So that's going to throw an error if we do that in the moment. But I could basically just take the year off of that, and it'll give us what we've got there. For the description, what would be interesting there? I guess we could take the overview. So movies.properties.overview. Take the first 100 there, and then just stick an ellipsis on the end. Perfect. Cool. And then we do card.contents. That's the extra content there. So I guess we could do we do the same, I guess. So icon name user. And then we can say movie.properties. Vote count. Should be good. And then I guess we just want to return like another. No, we won't put in a segment. So just stick in a div. Movies in there, and then we can say instead of this, we could just say search results, where the query is the query that gets updated there. Cool, so if I jump back in, everything should be okay. So if I search for matrix, what's happening here? Ooh, there we go, that's what we want. So something there is it's a number, isn't it? So that vote count should be 2 number. That is a number as well. So number is a bit of a pain in the ass in use-neo4j, but there we are. Well, in JavaScript anyway. Cool. So we need a key on there. So the unique property for that will be the ID. ID, so number. So we could use the ID property, or we can use like the internal ID. So this will never be the same inside the query that we're running anyway, so it should be fine. Cool. So what we want to do as well, I guess we want to put a link around that header. So you take the link from the React router. Cool, and then we're going to /movie slash, I guess we want the ID property. So movie.properties.id.toNumber. Cool. So it's saying it's not got this key prop, so I don't know if that's. Yes, it's there. It's fine. So. Map. Oh, yeah, you're right. Yep. Yeah, you're right. Map on the label. Sorry. Spot on. Label. Cool. Thanks. I was going to be a while there doing that. Cool. So yeah. So if we search for matrix now, it should update. Double check that's updating. Yeah. Cool. And yeah, so yeah, you could use that as a you could use a full text index as well. So I guess that would be a nice thing. You could do like a like Boolean searches. Probably beyond the scope of today, but it could be useful there. But yeah. Cool. So we've got our link there. Cool. So we've got these the searches there. So I guess the next thing we can do is we can go in and like this doesn't look too good. We've got 2 exclamation marks there, which is a bit poor. So what we can do is we can create another route, which will give us like an edit form for that. So basically, we've got this movie. So if I go into the movie component, so the actual ID that I've got is so it's match.params.id because that's why it's set up. So I can use the get cipher to use read cipher to pull that data back. So I can say so we want the loading state. We only want one record, so we've just got to just use first there. Equals use read cipher. The query will be so match a movie where m.id is the ID that we're going to pass through. Return m. And then we want the ID from match.params. So one of the quirks with with numbers and, or I guess like integers in Neo4j and JavaScript is that we have to convert this to an integer, otherwise it'll be treated as a float. So there's an int function from on the Neo4j driver, which will allow me to convert that into an Neo4j int. So that's the same thing as these integers where we have to call toNumber on it. It's the same sort of thing. It's not ideal, but it is what it is. So if the state is loading, then we could just return some sort of loading indicator. I guess what we could do actually is we could use the loading or the loader from semantic UI, which is kind of nice. So I could just return that. Let's give that a look. So if it's low, I mean it doesn't look pretty, but it kind of does the job. But yeah, if it's loading, then we'll have that that in there. So the movie will be first.get m, and then we can display some information about that. So just say for now, JSON.stringify the movie, and we'll give that no replace, and then we'll give it 2 spaces. Wrap that in a pre-tag. Cool. So this is the kind of information that we've got. So like I said on the last one, so we've got the identity there. So anything with a low and a high is an integer. So we need to convert that back to a JavaScript number using toNumber. We've got the labels there, and then we've got the properties there that we could use. Cool. So I guess we'll just build like a basic form here for editing the data. So we can create a new function. So let's call it edit movie, and that will be basically what we use to build a format, basically. I'll just stick that in there for now. So I don't think we're in a container, so we can use the container. Cool, things are center aligned. And yeah, so the idea behind all of this that I'm going through today is basically just to like provide you with that quick interface to interact with Neo4j. So the idea is we build some quick prototypes on top of Neo4j, maybe display some data, provide like a UI to make the graph a little bit more, I guess like non-developer friendly. But I mean, not every graph suits the force graph layout. You start to get sort of hairballs and things like that. So if you can display things in different ways, it's great. One of the things I'm looking at the moment is trying to include in charts, so we can generate a chart from a Cypher query and things like that. So that's kind of the motivation behind it. And like all of the code that is in use-neo4j for creating a driver, creating a session, and in the session you create a transaction, then you run a query against that transaction, then you commit the transaction. Like nobody wants to do that, so the idea is we'll make it as easy as possible to. Cool. Let's just give this a header. So we say movie.properties.title, and we've got that there. Cool. So let's create a form. So I'm not going to go overboard on this. I'm just going to create a couple of fields. So we've got the title and then overview. Sorry, the title and then set title will be its own state, and then we'll give that movie.properties.title as the default state. We do the same with the overview. So overview. Cool. So we'll convert this into a form. We'll remove that for now. So we want a form field. So we want two form fields basically, one for the title and one for the overview. Title, and then inputs. So the value of this, we want it to be title. And then on change, we want it to set the title to, so the event has a target, which is the actual input, and we want the value off of that. Cool, so we've got that there. So there's some state management inside there, which will sort that out. It's not bound to this header, so it's not gonna change that. Let's do the same thing for the overview. I guess we want that to be a text area instead of the. Cool, so that's where I did it earlier on. Cool, and then we need a button. So this will be a submit button. What you know, call that submit. That should be a primary button. Cool, nice blue button there. But we want it to do something. So we want to basically create like a submit handler. So handle submit is E. So that'll give us the event. So if I say on click handle submit, so that'll give us that event again. So we want to do E dot prevent default. So that stops the form from being submitted. And then we want to basically run a Cypher query against the database. So in use-neo4j at the moment, there's no way to do this, so we'll just do this old school. So we can get the driver from the context. So use context, and then we want the neo4j context. So that's neo4j context is exported from use-neo4j, so I can just get the driver from there. So like I said before, in terms of like trying to make this easier for people to prototype, this is what you would need to do if we didn't have these hooks available. So we'll create a session. So it'd be driver.session. We then want to run a query, so we can either create a transaction and run that, or we could just use session.run. And we want to match the movie where m.id is the ID, and then set m plus equals to be, let's call them properties. So the ID, again, we need to import in that int from the, oh, we've already got the int from the use-neo4j driver there. movie.properties.id. And then the updates, we want this just to be an object with the title and overview properties on there. So this is like a maths assignment. So what I'm saying is for everything that's inside this updates, anything that's inside this map, then set it as a property on that M node. Cool. So if that is successful, then we want to, I guess, set some kind of confirmation. State, I want that to be a string with no value by default. So we can set the confirmation to be node updated successfully. Cool, we can then add that into the form. And then, so confirmation, so if there is a confirmation, then we can, I guess, is there a message? Yeah, a message in semantic UI, so that's going to be a positive message, and then we can set that just to be the confirmation. Cool. So the question of, the question is, what are the question marks in the code? So for example, driver.session or session.run. So this is I guess like a TypeScript thing. I don't know which version of ECMAScript it's in, but basically what it's saying is, I mean, that should probably be an exclamation mark because by that time it will be set. But because you see this this driver has got a type of either driver, which is the use-neo4j driver, or it's undefined. So this is kind of a way of saying this is kind of like an optional thing. So I could say, say for example, there was a on the what is on driver. I could have like some sort of a variable. So I could say verify. So that would be driver dot verify connectivity. So that gives me like a method. So that's kind of like a shorthand for if driver and or if there is a driver, then so let's do this in longhand. If driver, then verify equals driver dot verify connectivity, else verify is null. So that's that sort of thing. And then you could say that, you know, for example, there will always be, the session will always be set, so ignore the typing on that. So yeah, that's sort of asserts that from a TypeScript point of view that driver will be instantiated and it won't be undefined, it will be that driver instance. Hopefully that answers the question. Cool. So let's do some more for some more state management. Yeah, right. Yeah, Alvis operator. Kind of like the quiff, and I guess is fringe. Cool. So that will be a type of error, but it won't be anything. And again, this is like another TypeScript thing. So if I do that, and then so this is going to have a type of error. But if I do set error E, maybe if I typecast that. So I get an error there because error is not assignable to the state set state action of undefined. So by saying that this is an error, or the value is error, because it doesn't take it from the value, it can't detect it from the value. In this case, like the title, so this would be any, I guess. It just means that the TypeScript error doesn't get caught there. But I guess for any, it doesn't worry too much about it. So we do the same thing for the error. So that'd be a negative error, and then we'll give it error.message. Cool. So in theory, I mean, this should all work now. So I guess what I could do is, if I just put an error in there, that will demonstrate the fact that there's an error. So variable updates is not defined. So the actual error itself is not important. It's just that we've got this this negative message there, which proves that this works. If I add that dollar back in, so it corresponds to a parameter, then everything will be fine. Should be good. So if I submit, node's updated successfully, so we can just keep doing that if we want to. So if we do edited there, so the node update happens in the database. So I could say, you know, where n.overview ends with edited. So that's our node that we've edited there. So we can find that just because it's got the value in there. I guess we could do something. Wow, what could we do that's more interesting? So we could say m.updated at, and then give that a date time. So we can take the response from that. Take the first record. So this is kind of like the get from the hook. Return m.updated at as updated at. So we can then get that from there. And we'll convert that to string. Cool. So it's updated and it's got that timestamp there as well. So now I guess if we keep editing it, then it will change every time. So it's kind of a rudimental form. It's not pretty, but I mean, it kind of does the thing. Does what you need it to do. Cool. Yeah. So that's the basics of use-neo4j and what use-neo4j can do. So I've created a starter template on React. Feel free to star it or to fork it if there's any changes there. If there's anything you think is needs changing from there. But essentially, it's just a way that you can use this template and then you can create a new template off the top of that. You don't have to go through the first 5-10 minutes of setup that I went on that I did. And it comes with the semantic UI CSS built in there, but I mean you could just strip that out. It's all part of the index.css. So the login form is styled, and then the semantic UI is imported in there as well. But yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of all we need to go through. Today there's some instructions on there on how to get started, what to do, how to do it. and then some instructions on how to test the app and then how to build it. So one thing I haven't shown, which is probably quite interesting, if I take the driver out in index. So by default, you just get this this login form. So it allows you to input the credentials for Neo4j. So I could, for example, I could do host to be my aurodb dot, I don't know, neo4j.io. And then it would default the values in there. So you can default the scheme, the host, the port, username, password, and database. So I could say that the default database is MyDB, for example. I mean, you should be able to, but anyway. Cool. I have to double check that to make sure that what's going on there. So yeah, so this gives you the login form by default. So if I open this up instead in Neo4j Desktop, so in order to test the app, then I can go to the settings pane. At the bottom of that, there's this enable development mode. So if I check that, and then the port that I'm running on is localhost 3000. So I can copy that URL into here. And then the root path, so it should be the path to your project, but you can just put in a slash. It's only important if you're running background commands. But 99% of the time, I just stick a slash in there. And then if I do, so Control and K on Windows, Command and K on a Mac to open up the action bar, and I can start to type development app. As soon as the development app is highlighted in blue, I can hit enter and then it will open it up. So you can see the difference between the two apps or the two windows is that because this has been opened up inside Neo4j Desktop, that context API has been injected in. So instead of having that the login form by default, instead we've got this project selector and then a graph selector. So basically, what the form is doing is it's picking up the projects and it's picking up the databases inside there. So if, for example, you had like a remote instance, so if you had like a Neo4j Aura instance running, then you could connect to that remotely. So in Neo4j Desktop, there's a single active graph at any one time. So if I stop this one and then start another, and that one becomes the active one. There's a button there to connect to the active graph, so that then connects to my Neoflix, and then I can search from there. Or I can select one from the list, so I could, for example, try and connect to that one. Or I can just click connect to another graph, and then that will give me the login form that you would get anyway. So it's kind of a useful way to either connect to the default graph or to connect to something inside Neo4j Desktop. Cool. And yeah, so the question around so the charts and extra views would be cool. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I guess the one thing I'm conscious of is that I don't want to take away people's enjoyment of building graph apps and building their own apps. So I guess this removes the boilerplate and the code that you need to write in order to connect to Neo4j. Once you've connected to Neo4j, then then you can start to play around with your own colors, with your own styles. So you don't have to use semantic UI. You can use Material. You can use Bootstrap or whatever. So we're going to see how this goes. In future, it may be a case that we then use the use-neo4j library on top of something else. We can put in like Miro charts, or I guess the chart library of your choice, Leaflet for maps, or whatever. So yeah, I mean we're going to see how it goes, see what the uplift is. But again, I mean, if it's something that you want to look at, if you'd like to experiment with building charts and different plugins and things on top of use-neo4j, then please feel free to drop me an email, drop me a tweet just to say you're doing it, or you can head to the neo4j community site and post about what you're doing on there as well. But yeah, I guess it's a flexible base and hopefully intuitive way for you to start to use Neo4j or to build apps with Neo4j, and hopefully just takes off one level of complexity for you, to allow you to enjoy developing on top of Neo4j, and to do the things you enjoy rather than the monotonous, creating a session, running a query, and that sort of stuff. Cool. So that is the end of today's session. So I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have any feedback, please feel free to get in touch. Drop me an email, drop me a tweet. Otherwise, we'll be here this time next week at the same time, maybe building this out, maybe building something else out. If you have any questions, if you have any suggestions of what I should be covering on this stream, feel free to reach out, and we'll see what we can do. The reason for doing this React app today is due to the result of a poll that I put out at the weekend on React. So yeah, I mean, it's just feel free to get in touch. Or otherwise, happy coding, and I will hopefully see you soon. Take care.